Hi, it's me, Jody Hand, Mrs. Hand Painted, and today's video is one of a series of 8 paintings that you can do, some mini landscapes. I'm going to show you how to do each one of these in one of the 8 videos that I'm sharing with you. All of the videos are separate, so this video will only show one of the paintings, and I am going to be doing painting number 1. You can do this on one 9 by 12 sheet of paper. I have this set up to do 8 different paintings that are all 2.5 inches by 3.75 inches. So you can also do them on these small little pads from Legion Paper Stonehenge. You can get these from lots of different retailers, but I purchased mine from Jerry's Artorama, and they have them in their buy it, try it deals if they're in stock. I'll put a link for that in my description as well so that you can look those up. But these are the exact size of all of the rectangles on my paper, and you can fit 8 on one 9 by 12 sheet of paper. Make sure you check out the other 7 videos so that you can do all 8 landscapes on your paper. And if you want to I want to go over the supplies I'll be using in today's video, and I'll be using the same supplies in all 8 of the landscape series. I'm using a Legion Stonehenge cold press paper. It is a block and it is size 9 by 12. It's 100% cotton paper. I'm using my Daniel Smith watercolor paints and my Princeton Velvetouch brushes. All right, I'm beginning with taking my large round brush. I'm using a size 10 and clean water, and I'm going to wet down my first rectangle. Just get a nice even wash of clean, clear water on there. And if you want to use a flat brush, you can use that too. And I'm going to do the sky first. And just using kind of a bright blue, whatever blue that you like to do your skies in, it really doesn't matter. If you want a list of all the paints that I have in my palette, I do have a post on my blog that I will link to, and it'll show all of the different colors that I have in my palette. All right, so I've done a wash of the blue across the top 2/3, and then I'm taking a paper towel and I'm going to lift some of that color off by just dabbing my paper towel into the wet paint, and that lifts off, and then I'm left with my cloudy sky. And if you take too much off, you can always just add another layer back on and just lift again. And it doesn't really matter too precisely how I get these clouds looking because I'm mostly going to be covering them up with my trees and my background. So I'm using a heat tool to dry this between all of my different steps. If you don't have a heat tool, you can use a hair dryer, or you can just wait between steps to wait for them to dry before you move on. For ease of these tutorials, I just wanted to dry everything in between just so that it would go more quickly and you wouldn't have to wait for me forever to move on. All right, so that is dry, and now I can do my next layer. And I'm going to do the little path, and I'm using just a warm brown color. And I want to start very narrow at the top and then expand as I come into the foreground, because as you're going off in the distance, it will get narrower. Right now, I'm going to add what would be kind of like a distant trees area. So I'm just kind of getting some water on the area that's just above where my path is. And then I am putting some bright green into that wet area so that it will look like fuzzy trees in the background. And then I'm going to add in some of that same bright green, just kind of dabbing it in and little swishes around the path to be like little bushes and foliage. When we're painting in this little small scale, you don't want to get too detailed, and it is just very loose because it's so small, and what you would see is just the colors of things, and you wouldn't really see these very bright details or up close little pieces of grass. So you can just do some swishes of a bright green color. You could add a little brown or yellow to it if you want. Just kind of just laying some color down in there just to give a little bit in the background. I'll be doing many layers over this. And I'm going to take a little bit of a darker green that I have, or you could mix some brown or some blue with your green to make a darker green. And I'm just going to add in some little dabs of that color. And I'm going to start adding in some up on the top part of the painting for the tree foliage. And just dabbing my brush down. I'm just using a round brush. And just mixing up different shades of green and different darknesses and light. If you wanted to make this fall foliage, you could always add in some oranges, yellows, reds, browns. I'm mostly doing green here. I'm adding some blue and yellow to it to give me different shades, putting brown in there. I've added some yellow to my green and just adding in some different colors just to give that a little bit more dimension and depth. Just adding in some of that yellow green to my foreground and covering up a little bit of the background, but leaving some space in there so that you can still see the background. Just going to add a little more along the edge of my path. Just mix in some of my other green shades, the yellow green, just dabbing that in to give different dimensions of color in my trees. Now I wanted to add a little bit more like shadowy areas, so I'm taking a darker brown, like a sepia type of a color, and just adding in some more shadowy areas along the bottom and along the edge of my path as well. Right now I'm going to start adding in some of my tree trunks and branches. I'm just using a very dark brown like sepia, or if you don't have that, you could add a neutral tint to a lighter brown that you had, or mix a brown from different colors, whatever you prefer to use. Just adding the trunk, and then in some of those empty spaces that I left in my foliage, I'm just drawing some painting some very thin lines in there, and just adding random lines in there for branches and trunks of trees. I'm just kind of blending that into some of the wet paint that I already had below so that they kind of just fade away on the bottom. They would be covered with bushes and foliage that are down below. And I'm going to do the same thing I did on that side, on the other side of the path. And just remember, as you get up into your foliage, you're only going to see little glimpses of the branches. You're not going to see a full limb because there would be leaves covering it. So you just want to do small little dashes within your foliage and alternate the directions that they're going just to give it a more natural look. I'm just adding some little branches poking into those empty spaces that I didn't get leaves. And I'm just varying the height of my trees here by placing the bottoms of the trees at different heights in the painting. They're not all going to be on the bottom edge. There'll be some that'll be further back, so I want to leave those higher up in the painting. And the farther away they are, you want them to be thinner. Your bigger trees will be in the front of the painting, so you want those to be at the bottom because they'll be closer to you. And then further away, you'll have very thin and not very detailed trunks of your trees. So I'm going to go ahead and dry this before adding another layer because I don't want any of my foliage that I do on top to bleed into the brown. And I'm going to add another layer of some different greens on top of this. All right, so just as I did in the previous steps where I was adding my foliage, I'm just adding some other shades of green on top to give some more layers. And again, not completely covering. You still want to have some of those little white areas showing through or that you can see your sky from behind. So I'm not completely covering this. I want this to be very loose, little dabs, and to have some space in between each of my dabs of my paintbrush. I'm going to add some along the base of my trees, represent like the foliage and grass that's growing on the bottom. And maybe have some of it kind of cover the edge of your path a little bit. And mixing up just different shades of green, mixing with yellow, brown, blue. In any areas you feel just need a little bit more, just go ahead and dab in some more color. And you can always add more layers on top if you don't like how much you've added the first time around. And like I said, just vary the colors of green. And you can add yellow, blue, brown. That will give you some different shades. You can add in a little bit more brown along the bottom if you want. I'm just going to dry that, and now I have a really cute little forest path scene. This took us less than 15 minutes really to paint if you were following along and using a dryer in between the steps. Might take you a little bit longer if you weren't drying between layers, but overall it's a pretty quick little mini landscape, and this would make a cute little card. Could cut these out, or if you wanted, you could also just tape off your edges if you wanted a clean, sharp line along your edges. Thanks for watching. If you want to go ahead and subscribe to my channel, I will be adding more videos all the time, and make sure you look out for the others in the series that I'm doing. I have 7 more landscapes coming your way.